Let's meet the women who were part of the conversation. Jen Agg is a star in the Toronto restaurant scene.
It's gonna be good.
She owns several restaurants and has spoken out about sexism in her industry. Canadian actress Mia Kirshner has starred in movies like Black Dahlia.
He asked me to marry him that night.
And the TV series The L Word. Raina Duras is the host of CBC Radio 2's Morning.
You'll hear a cover of a classic.
And before that, worked in commercial radio. And Sadia Muzaffar, who works in the tech industry and founded Tech Girls Canada, promoting women in leadership roles. I sat down with them to discuss an issue that's been in the headlines for weeks. So thank you very much for doing this. Now, we had a pretty vigorous discussion before we started to roll about kind of the reasons that you wanted to come here and the things that you wanted to talk about. So let's start with that.
Well, I think it's been a really interesting thing that's been happening, and we're having this wonderful exhalation as women right now. We're watching all of these people be taken down, and it sort of feels good. But on the flip side of that, there's a lot of public-facing messaging, opticking, if you will, being done by corporations, leaders of corporations, in my industry, in all sorts of industries, that feels good and sounds good and kind of hits all the right notes, admits complicity, while maybe perhaps within those companies there are still huge systemic problems. So that's really a thing that I'm thinking a lot about in terms of my industry right now.
What are you thinking about?
What I'm thinking about is that I would like to move the conversation into the area of change, because as we were saying before this started, we have a tiny window of time. I am not happy the way my union, ACTRA, and SAG have been handling all the post-Weinstein stuff. They've been having conversations, high-level conversations behind closed doors. I haven't been able to come to those conversations, and I would say that the majority of membership hasn't been able to come to those conversations.
So what's the recommendation that you would have?
So what we created is a symposium called After Me Too, and it basically is looking at how this happened in our industry from many different viewpoints, from a trauma-informed viewpoint, from organizational change, from an actor's viewpoint, and then we're going to come up with a series of recommendations and then publish our report.
In terms of what you know about the industry, what's a change do you think that should happen?
It's not enough to make training videos for people. Like that's pretty toothless. People, they're okay, but really the reason why people aren't speaking out is because of blackballing in my industry.
100%.
And there's nobody to check on that within ACTRA. Furthermore, why are the unions asking employers to investigate themselves?
And this is where I think it's really important to tie both of those things, and I echo that completely, because the conversation is still at an individual level. This is not happening because there are bad people. I think it's happening because systemically we actually support this kind of behavior. So
all of us do.
All of
I mean,
us.
that's the thing, is women are complicit too, and that's an even more complicated conversation.
Because we reward certain kinds of behavior, and if people are going to play, women and men and everyone else, we will continue to see this behavior until we talk about systemic change. And in tech, this is the same thing. These are industries that reward, unicorn behavior, where somebody's really brilliant at one thing and they had this idea, and they're not necessarily the best people to manage people, and they can have terrible behavior.
So bad in restaurants. Like I just feel the echo. I'm so sorry, Reena.
No, it's fine.
Like it's so bad in restaurants, and I think for me, one of my major complaints right now is, yes, of course, the unicorning and the rewarding bad behavior times a million in our industry, certainly. I
think
industries.
in media, ego is also rewarded.
It's crazy, but no one wants to give up their fave restaurant. People might give up their fave movie producer because that doesn't really mean anything.
But what about their favorite comedian or their favorite actor? Something like that.
I think restaurants, it's on a different level. I think there's like this idea that the mac and cheese is so good at the corner bistro that it doesn't matter what the chef did in the walk-in that one time.
Right.
And I think this has to do with the fact that we all recognize the contradictions. I don't want to pretend like people don't know what's happening. I think everybody knows, and everybody understands how they're benefiting from it, and they're like, actually, it's bad, I know, but it's not bad enough for me to go do a thing to change it, right? Like, that's where we are. So
Or it's not my problem.
Or it's not my problem.
Or I can pretend it's not my problem.
Right, or what about the idea that suddenly agencies are letting go clients who haven't been given due process, who've been accused of harassment or assault, but it hasn't, and there's no written policy around that.
Totally agree.
Why did that
All it's
happen?
going to take is one false accusation
Right.
to bring this entire house of cards that we've so delicately built over hundreds of years down.
There
Like we're
must
finally
be
having
due
this moment.
process.
Yes.
But in terms of rewarding bad behavior, I'm sure some people watching are thinking we're at a moment in time where when bad conduct is happening or even being alleged, people are reacting, consumers are reacting, people are saying, I don't
Are
like
they?
that
No,
company.
they're not.
Also, what about people who don't have the cachet, where that they would be, ousted and it's a big deal? What about everyday people? What about, somebody who runs a firm in a nondescript suburb and they're not going to make a story? Who's going to fire them? And that's the majority.
But what I think is really exciting about this time is that there is a domino effect that's happening. It's like you speak out, I speak out, you speak out, and then a lot of people are speaking out.
Well,
And
the more people, I believe, speak out and actually talk about this and normalize these conversations, the less we're able to just brush it under the rug. When someone does speak up, it's not terrifying. I think when we talk about power, if you are in a position where you don't have power and you have an experience with someone who does have power, the fear of ever speaking up about that incident is so paralyzing. And that I think with these conversations and having them more often, at least maybe you realize you're not alone and there's people who are in your corner, and there is a sort of a structure that it's not there yet, but it's forming, hopefully, to kind of support you.
So one thing that's changed is we're having this conversation, and
that's not enough. It's
And here's
not.
the thing, and I don't know if it's me, I think certainly around this table, conversations are a great starting point, and that's all they are. Until we talk about policy change and institutional change, conversation alone, we've been talking about this for 45 years.
so
That's
what
the thing,
I
is
was
if
going to
you-
say is that I know the conversation is not as long as you would like, but given what we've talked about, given why you're here, given what's going on, a final comment?
The examples we see become huge news stories that are, very. They take on a sort of life of their own in the press because they're juicy and they're often involving people who are very well known, are only the tip of the iceberg, and a lot of this stuff is not that obvious. It could happen to you. It could be somebody in your workplace. It could be involved, and you go back to work and you have to act like everything's fine. And I think that these little subtle, much more insidious kinds of sexual assault are a really big problem that we aren't looking at as much as maybe we should, because they are getting overshadowed by these huge, huge stories.
This is a moment that has taken a lot of grassroots work for years and years and years, and we cannot squander this. So hold your people to the fire. We need to figure out where people can go if they are taking that step to come forward. What is their recourse? If somebody confesses, who is paying for that? Where is their wage protection? We need to talk about these things so that people can come forward, because right now the system says if you don't come forward, nothing will get fixed. So help us survive that coming forward, and I think that's really, really important.
Yeah.
I think that I agree with exactly with what you're saying, but I think we are the change. I don't think we need help. I think it's a question of positioning ourselves and asking our coworkers, colleagues, and communities to rise up with us.
I mean, men have had the power for a long time. They don't maybe want to give it up, even the good guys. These conversations are making men uncomfortable, which is good, but at the same time, yeah, be uncomfortable. Feel some discomfort.
I think they're making more than just men uncomfortable, to be honest, which I think is good.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, I'm not uncomfortable, but I mean, I gotta tell my teeth up. It's time for this to actually come to a head, but I think I'm so worried it's going to be squandered by inaction, I'm so concerned about that. I'm not hopeful.
No, that's not going to happen. No, it's
Yay.
not.
I don't want it to happen.
It
but-
won't. It won't.
Well, thank you very much for talking with me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.